Hi guys, welcome back to the Wild Panda. So I know lately I've been talking a lot about traveling and purchasing airline tickets and using credit cards, but today I figured I would go back to the basics and talk about credit scores. So credit scores are really important, but how much do we actually know about credit scores? And how did credit scores even become a thing in everyday life? So today we're going to talk about the history of it. If you go back in time about 60 to 70 years, there weren't such things as credit scores. Back in the day, banks would determine whether or not to give you a loan based off of their judge of your character. Banks had loan servicers, and these people, their job is to just meet with you and determine to see if you're eligible or not for a loan. And this became a problem because it could be very discriminatory, it's very subjective based off of the person and the individual who's judging you. So pretty much it was like, if they liked you, then they'll give you a loan. And if they didn't like you, then you don't get a loan. And that just didn't seem fair. So in the 1950s, these two guys called Bill Fair and Earl Isaac, they came up with a credit tool. And they started the company Fair and Isaac Company, which is now more commonly known as FICO. Now, Fair and Isaac developed a credit scoring system, which they based on several different factors. Their initial system was not really widely accepted, so they kept redoing it and refining it, and then in 1989, it officially became sold to multiple lenders and credit bureaus and banks, and that's how the FICO score came to be about. FICO stands for Fair and Isaac Company. So FICO scores range from 300 to 850, and I'm sure everyone knows 850 is the highest score possible with FICO. FICO scores range from 300, which is the lowest, to 850, which is the highest possible. So your credit score is based off of several different factors. 35% of your FICO score is based off of payment history, and that is the biggest chunk that determines your score. If you make a late payment, that lowers your credit score. That also puts a mark on your credit report, and it stays on your credit report for 7 years. So if you make one late payment and that lender reports it to their credit bureaus, then everyone who pulls your credit for the next 7 years will be able to see that you made a late payment, which lowers your score and pretty much tells them that you weren't responsible in making payments on time. 30% of your credit score is determined by your debt to credit ratio. 15% of your credit score is based off of your length of credit history, which takes into account the age of your oldest account and the average age of all your accounts combined. So the longer credit history you have, the better it is for your credit score. 10% of your FICO score is determined by the types of credit that you have. It's a good idea to have a good mix of credit. So you don't want to have all credit cards on your credit report. You want to have a good mix. So things like mortgages, auto loans, student loans, and credit card would make up a good mix, and it shows that you have different types of loans and that you're responsible for paying those loans off. And finally, the last 10% of what makes up your FICO score are hard inquiries. Hard inquiries are whenever a lender pulls your credit report, and it's important because if you have too many hard inquiries on your credit report, then that kind of signals that you're asking to borrow too much money and you may not be as responsible because you're taking out too much credit or too much loans. Now, like I said earlier, late payments stay on your credit report for 7 years. After the 7 years, it actually falls off and then your credit score improves. Hard inquiries stay on your credit report for 2 years. So after 2 years of applying for credit, it'll fall off. And your debt to credit ratio actually refreshes at the end of every statement period, so it's every month it'll refresh. Which is why the quickest way to improve your credit score is to actually pay off debt as soon as possible. So why is it important to have good credit? It's important to have a good credit score if you plan to take out more loans. So it's kind of backwards. You have to have good credit. But in order to have good credit, you have to show that you're responsible by taking out a loan or borrowing money and paying that off, and that's the only way to improve your credit so that you can take out more money and borrow more. So this channel is all about credit cards and travel rewards and traveling for cheap and utilizing the welcome bonuses with credit cards, which means opening more credit cards. A lot of people think opening credit cards is damaging to their credit. So do opening credit cards actually damage your credit? The answer is kind of yes and no. So when you open a credit card, the bank that issues that card will pull your credit report, and that will result in a hard inquiry. It's safe to have about 0 to 4 hard inquiries on your credit report, and that's fine. A hard inquiry on your credit report will initially drop your score by a few points. However, after 3 to 6 months of the account being opened and making on-time payments and not maxing out your card, paying it off every month, it'll actually help your credit score, and your credit score will actually increase after 3 to 6 months of it opening. So it actually is pretty safe to open a new credit card every 3 months or so, as long as you're responsible with spending and using the money. You don't want to open too many credit cards or borrow too much money in a short period of time, because that'll signal to lenders, like I said earlier, that you're trying to borrow too much, that you can't pay it back. So whenever you open a credit card, the initial impact on your credit score will be that it'll drop it a few points. However, like I said, there are multiple different factors that go into making up your FICO score. And when you open a credit card, you get a credit limit, and that actually increases the amount of credit you have available to you. So remember, 35% of your credit report is based off of on-time payments. The next 30%, which is the second largest chunk, is based off of your debt to credit ratio. So take this example. Person X has one credit card with a $1,000 credit limit. They need to buy a new couch. The couch costs $500. So with a $1,000 credit card purchasing a $500 couch, they're using 50% of their credit limit. So their debt to credit ratio is 50%. That's high. You never want your debt to credit ratio to go above 20%. Person Y has 5 credit cards. Each credit card has a credit limit of $1,000. Person Y also needs to buy a new couch worth $500. Person Y's debt to credit ratio will be 10%, spending the same amount of money on the couch as person X. But since they have more credit available to them to use, their ratio of debt to credit is lower, which signals to the credit companies that they're more responsible and they're not borrowing more than they can afford. So for me personally, within the past year, I've opened 6 new credit cards, and I still have a fairly good credit score of 775 based off of Credit Karma. As long as you're responsible with money, credit cards can be very rewarding. Now I know Dave Ramsey says all credit cards are bad, but as long as you pay off your balance every month, you don't overspend, and you budget correctly, you can really take advantage of the rewards that credit cards offer. Even if you don't like to travel and you like to get cash back, you can either spend $100 at the grocery store paying with your debit card and not using your credit card, or paying with cash, whatever. Because when you use cash, you get nothing back. So you can either go to the grocery store and spend $100 on groceries with your debit card or cash and get nothing, or you can spend that same $100 on a credit card and get potentially 4% back, and then pay it right off and make that 4%. To me, that's a no-brainer. But there's still a lot of stigma out there against credit cards. So the key takeaway of this video is to better understand your credit score. Hopefully, I made it easier to understand what really impacts your credit score. It's very important to start building credit early. If you're a student, you can be added to your parents' account if they have good credit as an authorized user, and that'll actually help build your own credit. If that option isn't available to you, then you can always get a secured credit card, which is when you pay a deposit. For example, say you give a $200 deposit, then you'll have a secured credit card with a credit limit of $200. Those credit cards will report to the credit bureau, and as long as you're spending responsibly and paying off the monthly balances, then it'll start building your credit like that. So key takeaway points of this video. Making on-time payments is the most important factor to your credit score. Having a long length of history also helps improve your credit score, so it's important to start early. Your debt to credit ratio should not exceed 20%. Do not borrow too much at once or open too many credit cards in a short period of time. One every 3 to 6 months should be standard. And lastly, have a good mix of credit, so have different types of credit accounts open in order to show that you're a responsible borrower. I hope this video was helpful, since I feel like a lot of people aren't aware of what actually goes into the credit score. And my hope is that this video helps explain everything and helps take away the stigma of credit cards. Thanks so much for watching, guys.